Hello, welcome to Ignite Your Leadership Prowess. And I'm muted at Debowale. Today, as usual, we've got another phenomenal guest who is going to be inspiring, enlightening, and educating us today on something very, very, very important. I'm sure you'd want to hear what Liletta Harlem has to say to us today. She's a coach, an author, and a speaker. Liletta, let me give it to you so you can tell us the amazing things you've been doing in the world.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor. And yes, I really like to say that I empower people to challenge their belief systems so that they can thrive and be the best person that they can be. And I truly focus on women because we've had so many challenges as in regard to really knowing who we are and being comfortable with that and being able to show up amazing and phenomenal, but still have that good relationship with ourselves. So I do that by coaching. I'm also an author and I also speak, again, all to motivate and encourage women to just stand in who they are and have a good, healthy relationship with themselves.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. So, let's just start. How does having a healthy self-relationship impact one's ability to be an effective leader, say in a corporate setting or as a business leader?
Sure. So I truly believe that the most important relationship, the foundation of all relationships, really is that relationship that you have with yourself. And when you know yourself and when you can show up authentic and respectful of who you are, then that's how you can truly lead. So oftentimes you hear people talk about imposter syndrome. And really, the reason why that exists is because of women having doubts in who they really are. It goes back to that self relationship. So I believe that by building that relationship with yourself, really being able to speak to yourself kindly, respect your boundaries, all of that, then you can show up as a phenomenal leader to others.
Wow, that is really powerful. Okay, so do you have some practical strategies or techniques for developing healthy self-relationship, for an individual or anyone really?
Sure. And I talk about this in one of my books, which is called I Can Fix My, which is really about how do we do that? How do we take lessons that we've learned in life and change that so that we can have a positive, healthy relationship with ourselves? But some of the tips that I talk about in there is really being able to look at yourself honestly, but in a way that doesn't have negative comparisons. So, for example, I talk about this, and this is just so common. Again, I talk, going back to imposter syndrome or just doubts as a leader for a woman. I do this exercise, and I do this in my coaching too, where I have a woman, let's say you're 5'5", that's your height. And I give this example of if you stand beside, say, a 1 year old, how do you feel? Do you feel short? Do you feel tall? Most often people say, well, I feel tall. I'm much taller than a 1 year old. But then I say, well, if you then go stand beside, say, a sequoia tree, how do you feel? And again, well, I feel small. That tree is huge, one of the biggest trees. I'm going to feel small. And then I ask the question, but did your height change? No, your height did
Mm.
not change. What changed? Well, your perspective of yourself in comparison to something else, right? So, as women, when we find that we're doubting ourselves, we're feeling insecure, sometimes we feel great, we feel powerful, we can lead, but other times not so much. So, what I do is have them challenge that belief. What is it about this particular situation and circumstance that is making you feel small? Why do you perceive these other things as that sequoia tree? And now you're feeling small or not as important. So that's some of the techniques that I work with women about building that up so that you walk in, and I always have them say, whatever your height, I'm 5'5", no matter where I stand, right? That's a way to kind of just remind you that all those amazing things that you can be and you feel when you're in the right situation, you can still feel that no matter who you're comparing yourself with.
Wow, that is really powerful. Wow. And that brings to the fore how our beliefs and the belief system that goes on in our mind, affect the things that we do, from our thoughts, our perspectives of things, and how we show up in the world. So how can we maybe conquer, or how can we manage the beliefs that run in us, that holds us from doing the things that we want to do, or having a dream and not being able to achieve them? How can we, be at the fore of this system, the belief system that is holding us back?
Yes. Well, I always say I want people to challenge their belief systems. So, for example, I was working with a client who was having a hard time speaking in front of people. And so I asked her, well, what is the actual fear? And she said, well, I fear that they may laugh at me. They may doubt what I'm saying. They may think that I'm not an expert in what I'm saying, and or that I may sound stupid, all these things. So then I said, well, let's challenge that belief system. Has that actually ever happened? Has anyone actually, when you have spoken, has anyone actually ever laughed at you, made fun of you, called you names, any of those things? And she said, no, that it hasn't actually happened. So in challenging the belief, we were able to see that this is her own comparison, right? This is her own way of looking at herself in a negative light. But the truth is, when we challenge that belief, there's no validity to that. So I encourage people, whatever is holding you back, whether it's a fear of speaking, maybe it's writing that book, maybe it's starting your business, whatever that is, I want you to challenge yourself and say, well, why do I have this fear? What is holding me back? And then sometimes there may be some truth to it, right? So then we dig deeper, we peel it back even more, right? And we say, okay, now let's challenge it even more. How can I get to the point where I now feel confident to do this thing?
Well, challenging our beliefs, the beliefs that are holding us back. And I guess, when we're able to actually speak to these beliefs, confront these beliefs, and, hold ourselves accountable for overcoming the beliefs that hold us back, it really does help us with having that healthy relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
So, can you please, give insight on how we can build healthy relationships and how this can contribute to our mental and emotional resilience, in this world that we are in, a corporate setting, in our profession, in our business lives, or when we're leading teams, whatever situation we find ourselves. How can, building healthy self-relationship help us to move up our mental and emotional resilience?
Sure. So the first step is in building the relationship. So if you think about maybe a best friend or someone that you have a really good relationship with, no doubt you would come away from that and recognize that it came from conversation, it came from upbuilding conversation, and it also came from getting to know each other. So once you really know the person, you're able to have conversation that is in harmony with what you know about them, right? So the first thing I say is, as women, I want us to really get to know ourselves, and that requires spending time with ourselves. And I just wrote an article about it recently, how, sometimes as ambitious women, we're saving everyone, right? We're going out, we're speaking, we're doing all the things, but sometimes we're doing that because we actually are running away from addressing some things within us, right? It's kind of an easy scapegoat to help everybody else when maybe there's parts of us that we are afraid to address. So I encourage people to spend time with yourself, whether that's meditation, whether that's just silent time, journaling. Spend that quiet, quality time getting to know yourself and having healthy conversation with yourself. Once you do that, usually we're pretty good at kind of faking it, I'll say, with other people. But once you start to build that solid foundation, then when you are in these settings, what you will find is that it'll be more apparent when someone is causing us to feel uncomfortable, or when they are not matching the energy we have, that positive energy. So again, it starts with those healthy tips and healthy activities with yourself, then spreading out and allowing or not allowing anything less than that from other people.
Wonderful. That's really great. And I guess when we are spending this time with ourselves, quality time with ourselves, it's part of self-care, looking after ourselves, our mental and emotional, well-being, that sort of thing. So how can we as individuals, as professionals, business leaders, strike a balance, between self-care and the demand of our profession or our business or as leaders in our roles?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is let's get rid of the impression or the opinion that self-care it has to be what we see on social media, right? There's a place for that. There's definitely a place for spas and mani-pedis and all of that. There is a place, but truly self-care can simply be pausing, taking 10 minutes and walking outside, taking 10 minutes and getting away from everyone else and writing taking a pulse of how do I feel right now, writing that down, coming back to it later and addressing what was it about that meeting or that conversation or that interaction that made me feel a certain way. See, often we just keep going, so we never address that. So self-care is taking the small moments of self-care, taking the small moments to check in with yourself, to pause, reflect, and refresh. That is what's key. And if you really have that focus and mentality, you can fit that into even the most busiest of schedules. Take that time, 10 minutes to walk outside, reflect. If you're a praying person, pray. If not, meditate. Whatever is your place that takes you away and disconnects from what's going on so that you can ground yourself.
Good, lovely. So, what role does self-awareness play in nurturing a healthy self-relationship and helping us, being the wholeness that we want to be, or in our businesses, in our leadership roles?
Sure. So I'm sure we've all had the experience where we had a friend or a loved one, and they may have come to us and said that something was going on. They were upset or something like that. And we say, I had no idea. Right. And because we had no idea what was going on, what did that mean? It meant we weren't able to do anything about it. So when it comes to awareness, self-awareness is the same thing. If you don't take time to be self-aware and truly understand and address some of these challenges, then you can't fix it. And unfortunately, you'll continue in the same pattern until oftentimes we're forced to have to address it in some of the more traumatic ways, right? Where we just break down or we find that we're losing business or other things like that. So self-awareness is the key to being able to take action. If we are aware of who we are, our challenges, and our strengths, then we can take action to either fix or even embrace some of those strengths.
Good. Which takes me to, building some of our strengths and being the best version of who we can be, or thriving in our jobs, thriving in our career, our businesses. So how can, professionals, individuals, leaders in their organizations, business leaders, how can a lot of them, because I speak to a lot of them, and I know you spoke about this when we started, overcome things like self-doubt and imposter syndrome to build a stronger relationship with themselves and enhance their leadership roles?
Right. It's so important. And the foundation of that is challenge those doubts, right? Challenge those negative feelings. Don't let them have the right to stay, right? So if you're feeling doubtful, if you're doubting your ability, taking that time to challenge it, to say, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel that I'm not adequate in this situation? Now, let's say you do that assessment and you say, well, I'm not educated in this area, or I haven't done this particular thing. I'm not saying live in denial. I'm saying that once you take that assessment, then you can do something about it. So maybe you take the assessment and you're like, well, you know what? I can take some courses on speaking, right? I can look at some videos about how to engage my audience, right? So it really empowers you by taking that assessment. One, it can show you that maybe some of those insecurities are not valid, But two, if there is some validity, you can then take action so that you can be the person that you want to be.
Okay, so in taking these action, are there any specific practices or habits that people can adopt to foster healthy, self-relationship with themselves, to enhance their abilities, to enhance, the areas they want to be better at least?
Mhm. I am a big proponent of educating yourself. So, however that is, I'm not saying that you have to go out and get multiple degrees, but I do say there's something about reading. There's plenty of books out there about every single goal that you possibly can have. So, educate yourself. Again, I just did a post about the free resource of the library. We don't use that enough, right? There's so many resources right at the library, right at our fingertips on the internet, that really there's no excuse not to have some education around the things that we want to do. Other things you could do: get a mentor, get a coach, right? Mentoring is one of those best kept secrets to success. And many times when you reach out to someone to be a mentor, often they feel very honored and they gain something from it too. So those would be a couple of the things I would say as far as tools. Educate yourself, utilize the internet in a positive way, and then reach out to other people who are where you want to be and ask them, hey, can you mentor me?
That's good. So in what ways can, having that healthy self-relationship with yourself impact people's relationship with other people, with their colleagues, with their team members, with their subordinates, with their managers? How can having healthy self-relationship help with our relationship with other people?
Sure. I'm sure we've all been around people who it's obvious they are not aware of themselves. Maybe they're loud, maybe they're ignorant, and we're just uncomfortable and we're thinking, do they know how much, how annoying they are? So I would say, again, that's where when you have that healthy self relationship, you become aware of who you are, and then that's going to improve the relationships around you. You don't want to be with your colleagues and they feel that you always want to monopolize the conversation or you don't give credit where credit is due. And you have no idea that this is an area of weakness for you. So, if you have awareness of your strengths and weaknesses, you can then show up authentically. And when these negative things do pop up, you become aware of it before everyone else. And then that builds healthy relationships with your coworkers or those that you're in business with.
Okay, sometimes in life, either at work or in business, when we are doing our daily activities, particularly livelihood matters, there are times where we fall into situations of high pressure. So how can having healthy self-relationship with oneself, and as you spoke about, having that self-awareness with you about yourself, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, how can knowing all of that and having a self-relationship that's healthy with one of us, about ourselves, how can that help in situations of high pressure or, very demanding work environments? How can that help?
Sure. So if we see someone else and we can tell that they're overstressed and we can tell that they're just working extremely hard, the environment is very difficult, most of us will encourage that person to get some rest. We'll say things like, you can't do it all, right? We'll say these things to other people. But the question is, are we saying these things to ourselves? So the same advice, many of us, we know what to do. We know the answer because we tell other people all the time when we see it in them. But by being self-aware, we are able to have those conversations with ourselves. And here's the thing, especially if you're a high achiever, many times your coworkers or those that you are in business with, they like the fact that you're an overachiever. So they may not be saying, slow down. It looks like you're stressed out. This is where you become your own advocate, because they like the output, right? They like the benefits of you working yourself to death until you can't anymore, right? So again, that's where having that relationship, putting limits and boundaries on yourself, knowing when you can say, I can't do this right now, and being okay with that. Just because everyone else may be putting in a 12, 14-hour day, if you don't have the capacity to do that, if you checked in with yourself and that moment you don't have that capacity, being okay with saying, I can't do that. That's how you can build. And then people eventually will respect that. People will respect the boundaries that you place.
Well, people will respect the boundaries that you place when you actually place boundaries on your limits. Know your limits and look after yourself. Tell every other person, all these nice things, but don't forget to tell yourself to take it easy, to relax, to have the break, to enjoy your time. That's what Liletta is telling us. Okay. And to wrap this up, what one word are you gonna say to somebody going through all these moments? Like, okay, everything is so or someone who's resolving to be able to have that healthy self relationship with themselves. They want to build that boundaries into the things that they do. They want to know their limits and respect the limits and just be friendly with themselves and look after themselves properly. What one word would you be telling them now?
That one word would be compassion. Compassion. Have compassion with yourself. And that will look and feel like as if you're giving yourself a big hug. That's what I would say. I want you to have compassion with yourself. You're going to get it right. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to succeed. You're going to fail. In both scenarios, I want you to have compassion.
Well, that is super, super powerful. Have compassion for yourself. Well, and on that note, that's where we're going to be putting a stop to the Ignite Your Leadership Prowess for today. Thank you so much, Lita, for being my guest on the show. I'm really honored to have you. If someone wants to contact you, I'm sure we're going to be able to put all the notes on, the show notes. But could you just tell us one thing, maybe your website, how to contact you?
Absolutely. So it is my full name. So it's Liletta, and then the last name Harlem, Harlem. So my website is lilettaharlem.com. You can email me at info@lilettaharlem. But yep, that is the best way to reach me.
Okay, lovely. We will be putting everything on the show notes. And on that note, that's the end of Ignite Your Leadership Prowess today. I'm Muted Adebowale. And until I see you again, be the best of who you are.